When most people hear the word mafia, they think of gangsters in dark suits, smoky backrooms, and bloody turf wars over gambling, drugs, and unions. But what if I told you that, for one brief and bizarre period in history, the American Mafia was not only running rackets in Chicago, but also working with the United States government? This isn't fiction. It happened. At the center of it all was Sam Giancana, the flashy, dangerous, and cunning boss of the Chicago outfit. He wasn't just another mobster clawing for power in the underworld. Giancana reached higher, crossing into a territory no mafia boss had ever dared: politics, espionage, and international intrigue. The story of Sam Giancana is unlike that of Al Capone, Lucky Luciano, or Carlo Gambino. Those men built empires in the shadows, surviving or falling by the gun. But Giancana? He found himself entangled with the CIA, the very agency sworn to protect America from its enemies. Why? Because in the 1960s, America had an obsession: Cuba. And Washington's most powerful men believed that the best way to topple Fidel Castro was not through armies or diplomacy, but through the silent, ruthless efficiency of the Mafia. Who better to orchestrate covert assassinations than men who'd spent their lives eliminating rivals? And so, in a twist stranger than any crime movie, Sam Giancana and his outfit became pawns, and sometimes players in one of the Cold War's darkest games. Giancana was nothing like Carlo Gambino, who ruled quietly from the shadows. Sam loved the lights. He loved the flash. He paraded around Chicago in expensive suits, drove Cadillacs, and courted glamorous women, including Frank Sinatra's circle of Hollywood stars, and even, according to some rumors, a certain blonde bombshell named Marilyn Monroe. To his enemies, he was ruthless, unpredictable, and lethal. To his friends, he was charming, funny, and magnetic. To the CIA, he was a tool, a man whose connections could reach into Havana's casinos and beyond. But to history, Sam Giancana became something else, the living embodiment of what happens when crime, politics, and espionage collide. Picture this: a secret meeting in a Washington hotel room where CIA officials slide an envelope across the table to a mafia boss. Inside, plans to assassinate a foreign leader. This wasn't fantasy. It was 1960s America. The CIA wanted Castro gone. The Mafia wanted Havana's casinos back. And Sam Giancana, always ambitious, saw the chance to play both sides, helping the government while strengthening his own empire. It was an alliance built on lies, greed, and desperation. And like every deal with the devil, it would not end well. What made Giancana so fascinating was the contradiction at his core. He was born into Chicago's gritty streets, a child of immigrants, climbing the Mafia's bloody ladder through numbers, rackets, and hits. But by the time he wore the crown of the outfit, he was rubbing shoulders with politicians, entertainers, and intelligence agents. He wanted respect. He wanted recognition. Unlike Gambino, who thrived in silence, Giancana craved the world's attention. And that craving would both elevate him and destroy him. Because the spotlight that makes a man famous also makes him a target. Sam Giancana's life forces us to ask hard questions. What happens when governments turn to criminals for help? Can power be controlled when it's built on corruption? And how much of history was shaped in backroom deals we were never supposed to know about? Giancana's story is not just about the Mafia. It's about America during the Cold War, when fear of communism blurred the lines between right and wrong, patriotism and betrayal. It's about how one man, born in the alleys of Chicago, ended up influencing not just his city, not just his country, but international politics. In the chapters to come, we'll trace Sam Giancana's journey. From a poor Sicilian boy in Chicago's Little Italy, hungry for respect, to his bloody rise through the outfit, earning a reputation as both ruthless and brilliant, to his bizarre partnership with the CIA, where mobsters became would-be assassins in the name of American freedom, to his fall, marked by betrayal, isolation, and a violent end that silenced him forever, but left behind endless questions about what he knew. Most mafia bosses lived and died in the shadows. Some sought power, some sought wealth. Sam Giancana sought something different, to straddle two worlds, to be both outlaw and insider, gangster and statesman. In doing so, he became one of the most fascinating, dangerous, and mysterious figures in American history. This is not just the story of a mafia boss. It is the story of the day the United States government shook hands with the underworld and trusted men like Sam Giancana to do its darkest work. This is the story of Sam Giancana, the mafia boss who played with the CIA. Before Sam Giancana was a man who dined with celebrities and whispered with CIA agents, he was a boy on the rough streets of Chicago. To understand how he became the mafia boss who straddled two worlds, we first need to go back to the alleys of Little Italy, where hunger, fear, and ambition shaped him into the gangster he would become. Sam Giancana was born Salvatore Giancana in 1908, the son of Sicilian immigrants who had come to America with little more than hope. Like so many Italian families who poured into Chicago in the early 20th century, the Giancanas found themselves in a world of poverty, discrimination, and survival. The family settled in the near West Side, a neighborhood bursting with Italian, Irish, and Polish immigrants. Life there was unforgiving. Children worked from a young age, families lived crowded into tiny apartments, and street gangs ruled the blocks after dark. For young Sam, school was less about books and more about survival. He learned English on the streets, but the language that mattered most was the one spoken in fists, knives, and whispers about who controlled which corner. Sam was not a large boy, but he was wiry, tough, and cunning. By his teens, he had already earned a reputation for being willing to fight and willing to cheat. His peers noticed his quick wit and his sharper temper. He could charm you one moment and terrify you the next. That dual nature, part charisma, part cruelty, was the seed of his future power. In the alleys of Little Italy, young Giancana joined one of the neighborhood's youth gangs, known as the 42 Gang. At first, they were just kids stealing hubcaps, shaking down peddlers, and running errands for older criminals. But the 42 Gang was no ordinary group of punks. They were a proving ground for future mobsters. The 42 Gang became infamous in Chicago as a pipeline into organized crime. It attracted tough, ambitious boys who dreamed of more than just factory jobs. Many of its members would go on to become soldiers in the Chicago outfit, the organization that had once been ruled by Al Capone. Giancana quickly rose within the gang. He wasn't just tough, he was smart. He figured out how to make money for the crew, whether through gambling operations, petty theft, or muscle work. He also showed an instinct for leadership, earning loyalty by mixing humor with intimidation. The streets taught him an important lesson. In a world where the law couldn't protect you, power was the only currency that mattered. By his late teens, Giancana was already involved in serious crime. Witnesses remembered him as a driver in getaway cars, a lookout during hits, and eventually, a participant in violent scores himself. There are stories, half fact, half legend, that Giancana committed his first murder before the age of 20. Whether true or not, the reputation stuck. In the Chicago underworld, whispers of ruthlessness were as valuable as the act itself. What mattered was that people believed Sam Giancana was dangerous. And in Little Italy, belief was enough to earn respect. As Prohibition raged through the 1920s, Chicago was flooded with bootleg liquor and bloody gang wars. The fall of Al Capone left a power vacuum, but the outfit, the crime syndicate Capone had built, remained strong. They needed new blood. The 42 gang, filled with reckless but ambitious young men, was a natural recruiting pool, and Sam Giancana was one of the brightest among them. His combination of brains and brutality caught the attention of outfit leaders. By his early 20s, Giancana had graduated from neighborhood hustles to real mob work. He began working under established outfit captains, running numbers rackets, and enforcing debts. It was the start of a career that would eventually carry him to the top of the outfit itself. Even at this early stage, Giancana stood out from other young mobsters. He loved the money, yes, but he also loved the lifestyle. He drove flashy cars, wore sharp suits, and cultivated an image of someone destined for more than the shadows. He also showed a gift for organization. The numbers racket and illegal lottery, popular in Chicago's immigrant neighborhoods, became his specialty. It required not just muscle, but math, management, and trust. Giancana built networks of runners, collectors, and enforcers, turning what had been a chaotic operation into a disciplined money machine. The outfit noticed. So did the police. Arrests came, but Sam was slippery. Charges disappeared, witnesses changed their stories, and evidence evaporated. It was the first glimpse of his ability to navigate both the streets and the system. It was during these years that Giancana earned his underworld nickname, Mooney. Some say it was short for Mooney, a jab at his unpredictable, sometimes erratic behavior. Others claimed it reflected his hot temper, which could flare into violence without warning. Whatever the origin, the name stuck. And in Mafia culture, a name is more than a label. It is a brand. To be called Mooney was to be known as volatile, dangerous, and not to be crossed. Sam Giancana's childhood and beginnings in Chicago were not glamorous. They were forged in poverty, gang wars, and backroom deals. But out of those alleys, a new kind of mobster emerged. Unlike Capone, who bullied his way into headlines, Giancana balanced street toughness with charm and strategy. Unlike Gambino, who thrived on silence, Giancana was already drawn to the spotlight. He was ambitious, restless, and willing to take risks. The boy from Little Italy had found his calling, not in factories or offices, but in the dangerous world of organized crime. And in that world, he was just getting started. By the early 1930s, Sam Giancana had left behind the petty hustles of Little Italy. No longer just another street kid from the 42 gang, he was now a trusted soldier in the Chicago outfit, the powerful syndicate that had survived the fall of Al Capone and was hungry for new leaders. The outfit didn't recruit dreamers, it recruited survivors. And Sam Giancana was proving to be one of the most resourceful survivors the streets of Chicago had ever produced. Giancana's genius wasn't in sheer muscle, though he could be brutal when necessary. It was in the numbers racket. For decades, working-class neighborhoods in Chicago thrived on an illegal lottery where poor immigrants could wager a few cents for the chance of winning big. To the community, it was entertainment. To the outfit, it was a gold mine. Sam understood the business better than most. He streamlined collections, disciplined the runners, and cut down on theft. His knack for organization turned chaos into profit, and soon he was making the outfit millions. Under his watch, the numbers racket wasn't just surviving, it was dominating entire sections of the city. But money alone wasn't enough. In the outfit, respect came from fear as much as profit. Giancana developed a reputation for handling problems swiftly and without hesitation. If a rival crew threatened his territory, Sam responded with intimidation or worse. Stories spread through Chicago's underworld. How Mooney Giancana once ordered a man beaten so badly he couldn't walk for weeks. How he had another rival disappear entirely, his body never found. These tales, half truth and half myth, created an aura of terror around his name. It was this combination of efficiency and ruthlessness that elevated him. By the end of the 1930s, Sam was no longer just a rising soldier. He was an emerging leader in the outfit. The outfit was filled with legends. Men like Frank Nitti, Capone's successor, and Tony Accardo, a shrewd strategist who rebuilt the syndicate after the chaos of Prohibition. Giancana worked under them, learning the art of leadership not from books, but from backroom deals, bribed politicians, and quiet killings. Accardo, especially, saw promise in Giancana. He recognized that Sam's volatility was tempered by an undeniable charisma. People followed him not just out of fear, but because he made them believe he could deliver money, protection, and opportunity. In the Mafia world, loyalty was everything. Giancana inspired it in spades. World War II changed Chicago, but it didn't change the outfit's grip. If anything, the demand for gambling, drinking, and prostitution only grew stronger. Giancana used the war years to expand his influence. While soldiers fought overseas, Sam ran the numbers, controlled dice games, and kept the outfit's cash flowing. Police corruption remained rampant. Politicians looked the other way. In many immigrant neighborhoods, Giancana's word carried more weight than city halls. He was becoming less a gangster in the shadows and more a figure of authority, respected and feared at once. By the mid-1940s, everyone in Chicago's underworld knew the name Mooney Giancana. Some claimed he was unpredictable, prone to sudden fits of rage. Others described him as brilliant, a man who could remember numbers, names, and debts with uncanny precision. Both were true. His temper made him dangerous. His intellect made him indispensable. Together, they made him untouchable, at least for the moment. One of Giancana's most significant contributions was bridging the gap between crime and politics. Chicago was notorious for its corrupt machine politics, and Sam learned to exploit it. He forged alliances with crooked ward bosses, bought off police captains, and ensured that outfit money flowed into the right campaigns. In return, raids were tipped off, investigations disappeared, and Giancana's operations thrived. He wasn't just running rackets anymore. He was learning how to wield political power, the kind that made him more dangerous than any gun. Yet even as he built his empire, Giancana never escaped the shadow of violence. Rival outfits tried to muscle in. Street gangs tested the outfit's patience. Each time, Giancana answered with force. There is a chilling story from this period. A gambler who tried to cheat one of Sam's games. Instead of a warning, the man was dragged into an alley and beaten within an inch of his life. The message was clear: betray Giancana, and you pay in blood. Such stories cemented his reputation. To outsiders, Sam was ruthless. To his crew, he was effective. Either way, his rise was unstoppable. By the late 1940s, Sam Giancana had become one of the outfit's top earners. His success in the numbers racket, his ability to keep neighborhoods in line, and his growing influence in politics made him too valuable to ignore. Tony Accardo and other bosses began grooming him for greater leadership. He wasn't just another soldier anymore. He was a future boss in the making. The quiet boy from Chicago's Little Italy had transformed into one of the city's most feared and respected mobsters. Sam Giancana's rise through the outfit was not just about money. It was about ambition, control, and vision. He understood that to survive in the Mafia, you had to be more than a killer. You had to be a businessman, a politician, and a strategist. By the time the 1950s dawned, Giancana was no longer a name whispered in back alleys. He was a power player, a man who had one foot in the shadows and the other stepping into the bright, dangerous world of leadership. And soon, that ambition would propel him into the highest seat of the Chicago outfit, where his story would take a turn stranger than fiction. By the mid-1950s, the name Sam Mooney Giancana was no longer whispered in back alleys. It was spoken in nightclubs, casinos, and political offices across Chicago. The wiry kid from the 42 gang had climbed every rung of the outfit's bloody ladder. Now, with the backing of Tony Accardo and other powerful figures, Giancana stepped into the ultimate role: boss of the Chicago outfit, one of the most feared criminal syndicates in America. But Giancana wasn't going to rule like Capone had, with guns blazing and newspapers splashing his name across every headline. Nor would he rule like Gambino did, silently, almost invisibly. Giancana wanted both. He wanted power and attention. He wanted wealth and glamour. He wanted to be a king in the underworld and a celebrity in the world above it. Giancana's ascension was not smooth. The outfit had no official coronations, no golden crowns. Leadership was earned or taken through loyalty, profits, and sometimes blood. By the time he became boss, Sam had already proven he could deliver all three. He controlled the numbers racket, bringing in millions. He commanded loyalty from street soldiers, who admired his mix of charm and ferocity. And he had already shown that rivals who crossed him often ended up silenced permanently. When Tony Accardo stepped back from the daily grind to avoid the FBI's growing heat, Giancana was the natural successor. The underworld recognized him as the new Don of Chicago. As boss, Giancana didn't just sit back and enjoy the profits, he expanded them. He took control of gambling, extortion, narcotics, and prostitution. But his real genius was in labor racketeering. By manipulating unions and skimming from industries like trucking and construction, Giancana ensured that outfit money flowed endlessly. He also tightened the outfit's grip on Las Vegas. Casinos became pipelines of cash, with mob skims siphoning millions each year back to Chicago. Giancana's reach extended far beyond Illinois. It was national, even international. Unlike the reclusive bosses of New York, Giancana enjoyed the spotlight. He drove flashy Cadillacs, wore tailored suits, and surrounded himself with glamorous women. He mingled with entertainers, most famously Frank Sinatra. Through Sinatra, Giancana found himself in the orbit of Hollywood royalty and political families. The stories of his relationship with Marilyn Monroe remain clouded in rumor, but they added to the aura. To many, Sam Giancana wasn't just a gangster. He was a celebrity gangster, the kind who blurred the line between crime and culture. And that was dangerous, because attention, attracts enemies. Giancana's reign coincided with one of the most turbulent eras in American politics, the Cold War. He wasn't just running rackets, he was building connections. His relationship with Sinatra allegedly brought him into contact with the Kennedy family, particularly through Joseph Kennedy Sr., who had his own ties to bootlegging during Prohibition. Whether myth or fact, whispers suggested Giancana helped deliver votes in Illinois during the 1960 presidential election, a state that proved crucial for John F. Kennedy's narrow victory. But those connections also raised suspicions. Was Giancana just a mob boss? Or was he pulling strings behind the scenes of American politics? As boss, Giancana ruled with contradictions. He was ruthless on the streets, yet charming at the dinner table. He could order a murder in the morning and attend a glitzy gala at night. His soldiers both feared and admired him. He was unpredictable, sometimes generous, sometimes brutal. One moment he would crack jokes, the next he would explode in rage. This volatility made him dangerous, but also magnetic. People couldn't look away. Of course, the FBI couldn't look away either. Under J. Edgar Hoover, federal authorities intensified their war on organized crime. Wiretaps, surveillance, and informants placed Giancana under constant watch. But Sam was slippery. He dodged prosecutions, silenced witnesses, and leaned on corrupt officials to shield him. Time and again, charges evaporated. This only fueled his legend. To the public, he was the mob boss the government couldn't touch. To his crew, he was invincible. But power breeds enemies, inside and out. Rivals within the outfit grumbled about Giancana's flamboyance. They worried his love for the spotlight endangered everyone. The outfit had survived for decades by keeping its head low. Giancana, with his Hollywood connections and political rumors, risked exposing them all. And outside forces were closing in. The FBI was relentless. Journalists were sniffing around. The CIA, once his strange ally, could no longer be trusted. Still, for a time, Giancana thrived. He had everything he ever dreamed of: money, women, influence, and fear. He was the king of Chicago. As boss of the Chicago outfit, Sam Giancana redefined what it meant to be a mob boss. He was part gangster, part celebrity, part politician. He blurred the lines between underworld and upper world, between crime and government. But in that blur lay danger. For while Giancana sat atop his empire, the foundations beneath him were beginning to crack. Soon, the alliances that made him powerful, the unions, the politicians, even the CIA, would become the very forces that dragged him down. And when Sam Giancana fell, he would fall hard. By the late 1950s, Sam Giancana was not just a mafia boss, he was a man straddling two worlds. On one side, he ruled Chicago's underworld, running rackets worth millions. On the other, he was being courted by America's most secretive agency, the CIA. The story that followed is one of the strangest, darkest chapters in U.S. history. A chapter where mobsters and spies sat at the same table, planning murder in the name of freedom. For decades, Cuba had been the Mafia's tropical playground. Havana was a jewel of casinos, nightclubs, and cabarets, where mob bosses from New York, Chicago, and Miami funneled money through gambling tables and luxury hotels. Men like Meyer Lansky and Santo Traficante Jr. treated Havana like their second home. But in 1959, that paradise was lost. Fidel Castro's revolution swept through the island, toppling the corrupt Batista regime. Overnight, casinos were shut down, hotels were seized, and the Mafia's multi-million-dollar empire vanished. The mob wanted revenge, and so did Washington. The United States government was humiliated by Castro's rise. A communist ally of the Soviet Union, sitting just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, was unthinkable. The Eisenhower administration, and later the Kennedy administration, wanted Castro gone at any cost. But assassinating a foreign leader wasn't something the government could exactly admit to. That's when someone in Washington came up with a shocking idea. Why not use the Mafia? The Mafia already had the connections in Havana. They had the networks, the secrecy, and most importantly, no hesitation about killing. It was a devil's bargain, and Sam Giancana was right in the middle of it. In 1960, CIA operatives quietly reached out to mob figures through intermediaries. The mission: eliminate Fidel Castro. The price: hundreds of thousands of dollars, plus the promise of restored business once Castro was gone. Sam Giancana, always ambitious, seized the opportunity. Alongside Santo Trafficante Jr. and Johnny Roselli, he became part of what historians now call the CIA Mafia plots. It was a partnership that defied belief. Government agents handing envelopes of cash to mobsters, asking them to arrange poisonings, shootings, or whatever it took to end Castro's life. The schemes were as wild as they were desperate. There were plans to slip poison pills into Castro's food or drink. Ideas of contaminating his cigars, even tampering with his diving suit with deadly bacteria. Roselli later testified before Congress about how the CIA funneled poison capsules to the mob, expecting them to make the hit happen in Havana. The Mafia used their old networks, attempting to bribe Cuban officials, waiters, and contacts to slip the poison in. But Castro, cunning and paranoid, survived every attempt. Each plot ended in failure, sometimes because of bad luck, sometimes because of betrayal, sometimes simply because Castro was a step ahead. For Giancana, these plots weren't just about patriotism. They were personal. He wanted Havana's casinos back. He wanted the rivers of money to flow again. And if helping the CIA meant restoring that golden pipeline, so be it. But there was more. Being connected to the CIA gave Giancana something he craved: legitimacy. For a mob boss to be working hand in hand with America's most secretive agency made him feel untouchable. He wasn't just a gangster anymore. He was, in his mind, a power player on the global stage. The CIA Mafia plots remain shrouded in mystery. Documents were destroyed, testimonies were vague, and many of the players ended up dead. But whispers persisted. Some claimed Giancana's ties to the CIA overlapped with his connections to Hollywood and politics. Rumors swirled about his alleged relationships with Marilyn Monroe, who was also linked to President John F. Kennedy. Was Giancana a middleman between the Mafia, the CIA, and the White House? No one knows for certain, but the rumors alone made him a dangerous man, because secrets are more powerful than bullets. In 1961, the CIA launched the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion, an attempt to topple Castro using Cuban exiles. When it failed spectacularly, pressure to eliminate Castro only intensified. The Mafia plots continued, but so did their failures. For Giancana, each failure chipped away at his illusion of invincibility. The CIA could not deliver. Havana remained closed, and Sam's involvement became less an asset and more a liability, drawing unwanted attention from the FBI and rival mobsters. By the mid-1960s, Giancana's entanglement with the CIA was becoming a curse. On the one hand, he had tasted the thrill of being more than a mob boss. He had been part of secret history, shaping Cold War plots. On the other hand, he had exposed himself. The U.S. Senate's Church Committee hearings in the 1970s would later reveal the CIA-Mafia alliance to the public, shocking Americans who had never imagined their government could shake hands with killers like Giancana. But by then, Sam himself would be long gone silenced in the way mob bosses so often are. The CIA Mafia plots were a turning point in Sam Giancana's story. They elevated him from local boss to international player, entangling him in a web of politics, espionage, and betrayal. But in reaching so high, he also marked himself for a fall. The same government that once paid him would later investigate him. The same underworld that once respected him would begin to doubt him. Sam Giancana thought he could play both sides, gangster and patriot, outlaw and ally. But history has a lesson. When you dance with the CIA, the music always stops. And for Giancana, the silence that followed would be deadly. For years, Sam Giancana thrived in the dangerous balance between the underworld and the upper world. He had wealth, women, and political connections. He had sat across from CIA handlers, plotting assassinations in Havana. He mingled with Hollywood stars and politicians. For a time, it seemed as though nothing could touch him. But in the Mafia, as in politics, the higher a man climbs, the steeper the fall. By the late 1960s, Sam Giancana's empire began to crumble, and this time, no amount of charm or power could save him. The first cracks appeared in the form of relentless federal attention. Under J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI had once been strangely hesitant to take on organized crime. But by the 1960s, that hesitation ended. Federal agents were tapping phones, tailing mobsters, and compiling massive files. Giancana, with his celebrity lifestyle and alleged ties to the Kennedys and the CIA, was a prime target. His every move was watched. His phones were bugged. Even his private conversations with girlfriends were transcribed by federal stenographers. What once felt like invincibility now felt like suffocation. The FBI was everywhere, and Giancana couldn't silence them the way he had silenced witnesses. Worse than the FBI was the unrest within the outfit itself. The Chicago syndicate had always valued discretion, the ability to make millions without attracting headlines. But Giancana loved the spotlight. He flaunted his wealth, attended nightclubs with celebrities, and appeared in gossip columns. To conservative mob leaders like Tony Accardo, this was reckless. It endangered everyone. The outfit was supposed to be invisible. Giancana was making it visible. Whispers began that Sam was losing his grip. Rivals in the outfit started circling, waiting for the right moment to strip him of power. By 1965, the pressure was unbearable. Facing indictment after indictment, and with the FBI breathing down his neck, Giancana fled. He left Chicago and resettled in Cuernavaca, Mexico, a quiet city far from the streets where he had once ruled. For a man who had lived his life surrounded by power, women, and noise, exile was suffocating. In Mexico, Giancana was watched constantly by Mexican authorities. U.S. officials leaned on their counterparts, ensuring Sam was never free. The once mighty boss of the Chicago outfit was reduced to pacing a villa, stewing over betrayals and wondering if he would ever reclaim his throne. Exile stripped away the glamour. Without his empire, Giancana seemed smaller. Friends vanished. Allies distanced themselves. Even the CIA, once his strange partners, now treated him as a liability rather than an asset. his paranoia deepened. He suspected enemies everywhere, rivals in Chicago, informants in his crew, government agents plotting his downfall. At night, he reportedly walked the halls of his villa, restless and muttering. For a man who had once commanded the room with a smile and a threat, the isolation was unbearable. In 1974, Mexican authorities, under pressure from the United States, arrested Giancana. He was deported back to Chicago, the very city he had fled almost a decade earlier. The prodigal boss had returned, but not to glory. His old power base was gone. The outfit had moved on. Younger, quieter leaders now held the reins, and they had little use for a flamboyant exile who had become more trouble than asset. Giancana, once feared and admired, was now a relic. Adding to his troubles, the U.S. Senate was now digging into the CIA's darkest secrets. The Church Committee hearings sought to uncover the agency's role in assassination attempts and covert plots during the Cold War. Giancana's name surfaced repeatedly. The mob CIA connection, once whispered in secret, was now being read into the congressional record. And senators wanted answers only Sam Giancana could provide. He was subpoenaed to testify about the CIA Mafia plots to kill Castro. For Giancana, this was the worst possible outcome. Talking publicly about such matters was dangerous. Not talking might be worse. Either way, he was a man marked. Back in Chicago, Giancana fantasized about reclaiming power. He still had a loyal circle of associates. He still carried the aura of a man who had once commanded millions. But deep down, he knew the outfit would never welcome him back. The new bosses saw him as a liability. The government saw him as a witness. And the CIA saw him as a threat who knew too much. The king who had once ruled Chicago now walked the streets as a shadow of himself, looking over his shoulder, unsure which enemy would strike first. Sam Giancana's downfall wasn't a sudden fall from grace. It was a slow erosion of everything he had built. The FBI's relentless pursuit, his own love of the spotlight, the exile in Mexico, and the looming threat of Senate testimony all combined to strip him of power. When he returned to Chicago, he was no longer the untouchable boss who had once played cards with Sinatra and whispered with CIA men. He was a man out of time, caught between enemies in the government and enemies in his own family. And in the Mafia, when a man is no longer useful, he becomes expendable. Sam Giancana didn't know it yet, but his final chapter was coming, and it would end not in exile, not in prison, but in blood. On the night of June 19, 1975, Sam Giancana sat in the modest kitchen of his Oak Park home, just outside Chicago. Once, he had commanded an empire. Once, he had dined with Hollywood royalty, whispered with CIA agents, and ruled the Chicago outfit with an iron grip. But now, he was just a 67-year-old man preparing a plate of sausage and peppers, waiting for a friend to stop by. He had returned from exile in Mexico less than a year earlier, under pressure from U.S. authorities. He was scheduled to testify before the Senate's Church Committee, which was investigating illegal CIA plots, including the bizarre partnership between mobsters and spies to kill Fidel Castro. Sam Giancana knew too much, and in the world he lived in, men who knew too much rarely lived long enough to talk. Neighbors later recalled that the evening seemed ordinary. Giancana had been in relatively good spirits, joking with his housekeeper, moving about the small, plain kitchen. For a man who had once lived surrounded by bodyguards and drivers, it was strangely quiet. No entourage, No soldiers, no flashing Cadillacs, just Sam, alone in a suburban home. But ordinary nights are often the stage for extraordinary endings. At some point, as Giancana stood over the stove, a figure entered. Whether it was a trusted associate, a hitman, or even someone posing as a friend, we will never know. What we do know is this: Sam Giancana never saw another sunrise. When authorities arrived the next morning, the scene was brutal. Giancana lay on the kitchen floor, his body riddled with 7 bullets, 1 through the back of the head, 6 more in the face and neck. It was execution-style merciless, final, and unmistakably Mafia. The message was clear. Sam Giancana would not testify. Sam Giancana would not reveal secrets. Sam Giancana's story would end here, silenced forever. To this day, the question lingers: who killed Sam Giancana? Some point to the outfit itself. By 1975, Giancana was seen as a liability. His flamboyance, his exile, his looming testimony all made him dangerous. The outfit's code was simple: when in doubt, eliminate the problem. Others suspect the CIA. After all, Giancana's testimony threatened to expose some of the darkest alliances in U.S. history. His murder conveniently ensured that the most incriminating details about the CIA Mafia plots died with him. Still others believe it was a mix-organized crime acting with a wink and a nod from powerful men in Washington. In the end, the truth may never be known. The only certainty is that Giancana's silence was bought in blood. The news of Giancana's death sent shockwaves through Chicago and beyond. Here was a man who had once seemed untouchable, murdered in his own home like any other gangster. The myth of invincibility was shattered. The Senate hearings went on, but without Giancana's testimony, many questions about the CIA Mafia connection remained unanswered. Documents were sealed, stories contradicted each other, and history was left with shadows where there should have been light. Sam Giancana's legacy is one of contradictions. To some, he was a ruthless killer, a mob boss who brought violence and corruption to Chicago's streets. To others, he was a genius organizer, a man who turned the numbers racket into a multi-million-dollar empire. To the CIA, he was both an asset and a liability, a tool to be used and discarded. And to history, he became the symbol of a strange, dangerous moment when the lines between crime and government blurred. Unlike Gambino, who ruled quietly until he died in his bed, Giancana sought the spotlight, and it destroyed him. Unlike Capone, who fell to taxes, Giancana fell to bullets. And unlike Escobar, who fought the state openly, Giancana's downfall came in whispers, betrayals, and backroom deals. The story of Sam Giancana leaves us with haunting lessons. Power without discretion is fragile. The Mafia thrived on silence, but Giancana craved attention. That craving exposed him. When criminals and governments make deals, both sides lose. The CIA thought it could use mobsters without consequence. Instead, it stained its own history and left bodies behind. In the end, every boss is replaceable, no matter how feared, no matter how wealthy. The outfit treated Giancana the way it treated all liabilities with finality. On the kitchen floor of his modest Oak Park home, Sam Giancana's life ended in violence, just as it had been lived. 7 bullets silenced the man who thought he could be both gangster and statesman, both outlaw and insider. But his story did not end there. His death remains a symbol, a reminder that the Mafia was never just about crime, but about power, politics, and the dangerous alliances forged in the shadows of history. Sam Giancana's assassination closed his chapter, but the questions he left behind still echo. Who truly ordered his death? How much of America's history was shaped by men like him? And how many secrets remain buried with his body? In the end, Giancana's life was proof of one truth. In the underworld, silence is the only guarantee. And silence was exactly what he gave history with 7 bullets.